This Monday, Washington, D.C. could see something it hasn't in decades. Soldiers on its streets, not for a parade, not for a celebration, but to crack down on crime. President Donald Trump says he's ready to send in the National Guard. And his promise? To end the crime, murder, and death in America's capital? But with violent crime already dropping sharply? Why now? And what exactly is he planning? The answers may surprise you. For weeks, President Trump had been dropping hints, warning of a possible federal takeover of Washington, D.C., hinting that local leaders weren't doing enough to keep the city safe. Most people dismissed it as political talk. Until now, over the weekend, sources in D.C. revealed that the National Guard could be deployed as soon as Monday, not in a symbolic show of strength, but as an active presence on the streets of the nation's capital. What's unclear, and what's making officials nervous, is the plan itself. No one knows exactly how many troops would arrive, where they'd be stationed, or what orders they'd be given. The secrecy is adding fuel to the fire, with some wondering if this move is more about politics than public safety. Hundreds of federal officers have already been patrolling the city in recent days, making arrests for everything from carrying an unlicensed pistol to riding dirt bikes in city parks. But this would be something very different, a full-scale military-style deployment, right in the heart of America's democracy. And that's where the tension starts to boil over. While the White House prepares for what could be a sweeping military presence in D.C., Mayor Muriel Bowser isn't staying quiet. Speaking on national television, she made it clear the National Guard is not a local police force. They are not law enforcement officials, Bowser said. They are men and women who leave their families to serve their country. And that just is not their primary role, to enforce local laws. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that they are not being used efficiently. And her concerns aren't just about efficiency. Behind closed doors, city officials say there's been little communication from the Trump administration about how or even why this deployment would happen. For the mayor, that lack of coordination could turn a security plan into chaos on the streets. But here's where things get even more complicated. The city's own crime numbers tell a very different story from the one coming out of the White House. On paper, Washington, D.C. is safer now than it's been in years. According to data from the Metropolitan Police, violent crime has dropped 26% compared to 2024, and compared to 2023, the decrease is even more dramatic. Over 60%, those are the kinds of numbers city leaders usually celebrate. But instead of declaring victory, the Trump administration is signaling an emergency. That contrast is raising eyebrows. If crime is already falling so sharply, why talk about putting boots on the ground? Supporters of the move say numbers can be deceiving, that even one high-profile violent incident can shake public trust. Critics argue it's political theater, designed to project strength and control in the nation's capital, and yet, this isn't the first time D.C. has seen troops on its streets. But the way this could happen now is far from routine. Washington, D.C. has called on the National Guard before, but almost always under very specific circumstances. Their presence is usually tied to big national events or moments of crisis. Inaugurations, large-scale protests, unrest that local police can't manage on their own. In 2020, they were deployed during the Black Lives Matter protests. In January 2021, they were on the front lines after the Capitol attack. And you have to go back to 1994 to find a case where the Guard was brought in purely to fight crime, when murders in the district hit a staggering 378 in a single year. The key difference: in most of those cases, the request came from the city itself. This time, the push is coming from the Oval Office. With no formal invitation from D.C. leadership, that alone makes this moment unprecedented and potentially explosive. And now, President Trump is promising something even bigger than a troop deployment. A sweeping change to the city itself. For President Trump, this isn't just about sending in troops, it's about making a statement. Over the weekend, he took to Truth Social with a bold claim. The plan would essentially stop violent crime in Washington, D.C., but he didn't stop there. He promised to address not only crime, murder, and death, but also the and general physical renovation of the city. To his supporters, it sounded like a vision to restore the capital's glory. To his critics, it was a vague and sweeping promise, with no clear roadmap. And that's the sticking point. No details on how these goals will be achieved. No word on how long the Guard might stay. And no answers about what authority they'll have once they arrive. The only thing that's certain is that the announcement is coming soon, and it could change the mood of the entire city overnight. Which brings us to the question everyone's asking: what exactly will Monday's press conference reveal? At 10 a.m. Monday, all eyes will be on the White House. President Trump says the announcement will stop violent crime in D.C., but beyond that, almost nothing is known. Who will be standing beside him? Will it be military leaders, law enforcement officials, or political allies? And what exactly will they say to justify deploying the National Guard when crime is already at historic lows? The secrecy has only fueled speculation. Some believe this will be the start of a long-term federal presence in the Capitol. Others think it's a calculated political move aimed at showing strength on the national stage. Either way, the stakes are enormous, not just for D.C., but for the precedent it could set for the rest of the country. One thing is clear. By Monday afternoon, the streets of the nation's capital could look very different in just hours. Washington could become the stage for one of the most controversial moves of Trump's presidency. Supporters call it decisive action. Critics warn it's an overreach that could blur the line between civilian policing and military force. With crime dropping, the city's leadership pushing back, and the White House staying tight-lipped, the question isn't just what will happen next, it's why it's happening now. Is this the beginning of a bold new crackdown on lawlessness? Or a political power play unfolding in the heart of America's democracy? By the end of Monday, the answer might be written not in press releases, but in the sights and sounds on the streets of D.C.